Rebecca's reflection. Rebecca stood in front of her closet, fingertips brushing across fabrics she hadn't worn in months. The dinner invitation from Kevin had arrived 2 weeks ago, but she'd only accepted it yesterday. Her first social event since finalizing the divorce 2 months ago meant she'd have to face questions, assumptions, and the weight of others' opinions. She pulled out and rejected 4 outfits before selecting a navy blouse, understated but sharp, professional without trying too hard, the kind of thing a woman who was doing fine would wear. She paired it with tailored pants and simple earrings that Mark had never particularly liked or noticed. Looking in the mirror, she adjusted her posture, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin slightly. The woman reflected back appeared composed, stable, put together, someone with direction. The muscles along her jaw tightened as she practiced a relaxed smile, first too wide, then adjusted to something less eager, more poised. Do confident women laugh with teeth? Or no teeth? She wondered, trying both versions in the mirror. The teeth-bearing grin looked manic. The closed-mouth smile looked like she was hiding something. She settled on a slight off-center half-smile that she hoped showed casual amusement, rather than the strain she felt. Her practiced laugh startled her with its forced quality, and she made a mental note to avoid humor altogether if possible.
"This will be fine,"
she whispered to her reflection, practicing the subtle tilt of her head that showed friendly interest without vulnerability. She ran through the motions of taking a sip from an imaginary wine glass, making sure the movement appeared elegant rather than nervous. 5 seconds of eye contact, she reminded herself, enough to show engagement without seeming intense. Her phone buzzed with the rideshare's arrival notification. Rebecca took one final glance in the mirror, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. The apartment behind her reflection, cleaned beyond recognition of the chaos it had been just hours ago, confirmed what the mirror showed. Everything in order. Nothing to worry about here. She'd even positioned a few books on the coffee table to suggest casual intellectual engagement, in case anyone came back to her place afterward. In the back seat of the car, Rebecca rehearsed her responses to inevitable questions. About work. I'm consulting while exploring some creative projects, vague enough to sound intentional, though the truth was 2 short-term contracts and a half-finished portfolio. About the divorce. It was mutual. We're both moving forward, glossing over the messier reality of unsigned papers and belongings still in storage. About her plans. I'm considering several opportunities, which sounded better than admitting she woke most mornings with no clear idea what she was rebuilding toward. Her jaw ached. She realized she'd been clenching it since leaving her apartment and consciously relaxed the muscles, rolling her shoulders back. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and she immediately reassembled her composed expression, even adding a slight, practiced smile as though she were heading toward something pleasant rather than an evening of calculated self-presentation. Kevin's apartment was in one of those renovated factory buildings, exposed brick walls, tall windows that overlooked the river. The kind of space that announced its occupant had reached a certain level of success. Inside, warm lighting cast soft shadows, and the scent of rosemary and garlic filled the air. A record player in the corner played something jazzy and low. 7 other guests mingled with glasses of wine, their conversation creating a gentle hum.
"Rebecca, you made it!"
Kevin moved through the room, offering a brief, easy hug.
"Everyone, this is Rebecca. We worked together at Meridian last year."
Rebecca smiled, accepting a glass of red wine, carefully balancing her eye contact with each person as Kevin made introductions. She was acutely aware of how she held herself, chin lifted just so, shoulders back but not rigid, expression interested but not overeager. Her gaze swept the room between introductions, taking in clothing choices, conversation groupings, and social dynamics. She adjusted her own demeanor slightly after each assessment, matching her animation level to the room's energy. Rebecca suddenly realized she'd been holding her breath while trying to appear relaxed, the contradiction making her feel slightly lightheaded. She exhaled quietly, hoping no one had noticed her momentary lapse, in her carefully constructed facade.
Rebecca, this is Sarah.
Kevin introduced her to a woman in a loose linen dress the color of sand, her dark hair pulled back in what looked like a hastily assembled knot. Rebecca noticed Sarah was barefoot, her sandals discarded under a nearby chair.
Sarah teaches accounting at the community college.
Nice to meet you.
Rebecca's voice adjusted to sound warm, but not overly enthusiastic. She noted Sarah's ease, how she leaned against the kitchen counter, the way her hands moved expressively when she spoke. It seemed to require no effort. Rebecca instantly adjusted her own posture to mirror Sarah's relaxed stance, though the deliberate nature of the movement made it feel artificial in her own body. At dinner, Rebecca seated between Sarah and a man named Felix, who worked in finance. The table was beautifully set with mismatched ceramic plates and cloth napkins in jewel tones. Candles caught the facets of wine glasses, sending little rainbows across the wooden table. Rebecca adjusted herself frequently, sitting taller when attention turned her way, recalibrating her laugh when someone told a story, arranging her features into expressions of interest when others spoke. Every gesture she made was performed with a choreographed quality that no one seemed to notice, but that exhausted something deep inside her. A hidden muscle worked to fatigue.
You're in graphic design, right?
Felix asked between bites of roasted vegetable tart. Rebecca had been a brand strategist at Meridian, not a designer. The correction formed instantly in her mind, but speaking it felt like too much effort, too much attention. She could hear how it would sound. Too fussy, too precise.
I've worked on some design projects.
The half-truth slipping out easily. Her shoulder blades tightened, the physical sign of the small compromise. She immediately recalibrated her body language to make up for it, leaning forward slightly with practiced interest as she asked him about his work. Across the table, Sarah was describing a camping trip where she'd forgotten tent poles and had to make a shelter from a tarp and fallen branches.
I woke up essentially lying in a stream.
Sarah laughed.
Had to walk 2 miles back to the car, looking like I'd been swimming fully clothed.
Everyone at the table laughed. So did Sarah, unexpected and real. She didn't seem concerned about how the story reflected on her. The camping disaster was just that, a funny story, not a personal failing to be repackaged or explained away. Rebecca realized her hand had been unconsciously maintaining the perfect angle of her wine glass, keeping it perpetually upright even when she wasn't drinking. She set it down, letting it sit slightly askew. After the main course, while Kevin cleared plates, a man named John mentioned being between jobs.
I left banking after 8 years.
He swirled the wine in his glass.
Not sure what I want next, honestly. I know I should have a plan by now, but every time I try to make one, it feels like I'm just going through motions someone else designed.
Rebecca waited for the usual responses, offers of connections, suggestions of fields to explore. Instead, there were nods of understanding.
Sometimes the not knowing is better,
said an older woman at the end of the table.
It's tempting to rush to fill those gaps. Usually the rush doesn't work anyway.
No one tried to fix John's uncertainty. The conversation simply held space for his experience, then moved on. Rebecca felt something in her chest loosen slightly, as if a band that had been pulled too tight had been given some slack. When Kevin brought out dessert, a homemade berry tart with vanilla-flecked cream on the side, he mentioned casually,
Rebecca used to bake amazing things when we worked together. Those almond cookies you'd bring in, what were they called?
Lemon squares.
Rebecca supplied, feeling oddly seen and exposed at the same time. She'd spent hours perfecting that recipe, bringing in test batches that her colleagues would evaluate with exaggerated seriousness.
Do you still bake much?
Asked a woman across the table whose name Rebecca had already forgotten, another small failure of her usually careful social attention. Rebecca was about to form her usual polished response about busy schedules and small kitchens and the challenges of baking for one, but then paused. The weight of maintaining the narrative suddenly felt heavier than the potential discomfort of simple truth.
Not in a while.
The words came out on their own. No explanation, no reframing. The unadorned answer felt strange in her mouth, almost foreign, but also somehow lighter. As the evening continued, guests drifted into smaller conversations. Rebecca was in the kitchen with Sarah, helping to make coffee. Sarah moved with a kind of ease, reaching for mugs, measuring grounds, her movements unhurried.
Kevin mentioned you're newly divorced.
Sarah glanced at Rebecca as she filled the coffee maker with water. It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement. There was no expectation of a particular response. Rebecca tensed, then nodded. Her prepared script flickered at the edges of her mind. The mutual decision, the amicable terms, the forward-looking perspective.
I took a pottery class after mine.
Sarah watched the coffee drip through.
I'm terrible at it, just awful. But I go every Thursday and make these lopsided, sad little bowls.
Her real smile reached her eyes.
Something about making things with my hands again.
I used to make things.
Rebecca said.
Scarves, tarts, weird little crafts from tutorials online. I haven't touched any of it since.
She didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't quite name the when or why of the stopping.
Sometimes we need a little time before we go back to the things we love.
Sarah said quietly, her eyes on the coffee. Rebecca looked at her, startled by how the gentle words touched something true. Her throat tightened.
Yes.
She agreed softly. She didn't elaborate, didn't explain, just let the truth of it sit between them as the coffee finished brewing. When Rebecca left Kevin's apartment that night, the cool evening air felt different against her skin. More immediate somehow. Walking home, she realized no one at the dinner knew what she did now, or what her plans were, and that felt okay. She'd spent less energy managing how she came across, and the world hadn't ended. The conversation had flowed around and through her. Passing a darkened storefront, she caught her reflection in the window, less posed than the one she'd checked in her apartment mirror hours earlier. Her shoulders had dropped to a natural position. Her face looked softer. Just her, moving through the night, not a carefully constructed image of recovery or success. At home, Rebecca opened the drawer where she'd stored her baking tools after the divorce. Measuring cups nested inside each other, silicone spatulas, a pastry brush still stained faintly purple, from the last berry tart she'd made. She ran her finger along the edge of a metal baking pan, feeling its coolness against her skin. She didn't take anything out. Just looked at them, these artifacts from before. She closed the drawer and turned out the light, her jaw already relaxed.